Hello! Today we're talking about the goblet squat. So the goblet squat is a squat variation that has a ton of unique benefits. The primary of which is probably just that it's more convenient in many ways than a back squat. You have more access to it for most people, but it also has a ton of benefits all its own. It can actually help to improve your back squat and generally improve your biomechanics, your mobility, all that good stuff, translating to better performance and better resilience. So first you're going to take your weight, which could be a kettlebell or a dumbbell, but literally anything really. You can use a plant pot, a chair, a person, a sandbag, but whatever the case, you take your weight in front of you, hold it like this in two hands, and then just squat all the way down. And the key with the goblet squat is to squat all the way down. This is an ass to grass movement by necessity. You can hold the weight like this, or like this, but if you hold it like this, then it's going to be easier to, add additional movements if you want to. It doesn't really matter though, especially obviously if you've got a dumbbell, in which case I'd recommend holding it from one end in two hands. And as you're going down, really focus on correct form. Make sure that you're keeping your back nice and straight. Try and avoid your back rounding and try and avoid any butt wink. This is a great opportunity to work on those things. Also, you don't want to be bending over forwards. The great thing about this is that because you can move the weight further and closer to you, that means you can move the center of gravity, which means you shouldn't need to bend your whole body forward, so you can focus on keeping a nice, straight, upright torso as you get down deep into that goblet squat. So it looks a bit like this. You ideally want the elbow to be tracking inside of the knees here. That's great for transitioning into other moves again, but it's really not the end of the world if it doesn't. So you guys know how much I covet a deep, natural bodyweight squat. I think this is a position everyone should be able to get into. It's something that we traditionally have always been able to do, but it's just our modern lifestyles that mean that many of us now can't. This translates to poorer and impaired movement in a whole range of different activities, including the back squat, but also anytime we want to bend over to pick something up or squat down to play with our kids, we should be able to get into this position. In fact, it should be a resting, relaxing position. There's a few reasons a lot of people struggle with this position though. One of those is ankle mobility. Because your ankles are so stiff, you're not used to dorsiflexion, that means lifting them upwards. That makes it hard to get into this position without tipping over. What happens is that because you lack that mobility in your ankles, you can't get your center of gravity forwards enough. It needs to be leaning back slightly. Throw a weight on your back and now your center of gravity is way back, which means that if you get anywhere near the deepest part of a squat, you're going to tip over backwards. The solution to this, of course, is then to lean your body forward, but this is just a band-aid. You're not fixing your ankle mobility, so you still can't easily get into that deep squat position when you take the weight away. And this is going to prevent you from doing things like a pistol squat because you need that mobility in order to get down there. You'll notice any lack of mobility the minute you try to do a pistol squat. But if you take your kettlebell and perform this movement, it's actually going to push you deeper into that position. And because the weight's in front of you, you can stay in this position and it's going to act as a counterbalance. So it actually aids that lack of mobility, helps you to get into the correct position, but also it has a slight weighted stretch, which is actually going to improve your ability to get there without the weight over time. So just holding this deep squat position, holding a kettlebell, is brilliant for improving your mobility in your ankles. But as well as nourishing our posterior chain muscles, it's also really important that we nourish our skin, which is why I'm happy to have Tiege Hanley as today's sponsor. So Tiege Hanley simplifies the process of taking care of your skin. It does this by providing all the different products you could need direct to your door, along with an instruction card showing you exactly how to use them. This is actually really useful. I was always a little bit hesitant to get started with a skincare routine, just because it seemed like a bit of a faff. I didn't know where to start. Tiege Hanley makes it so simple that there's no reason not to, and I've genuinely noticed a really big difference. I'm starting to get a little bit older now. I'm 36, not long until I'm 40. I need to try and keep up with these younger fitness YouTubers, and that means I can't be looking like a piece of old leather. And like I say, Tiege Hanley just makes it really easy. And you don't just have to take my word for it. Tiege Hanley have over 7,000 5-star reviews from users around the world. I recommend you start with their level 1 system. That comes with all the basics: a daily face wash, an exfoliating scrub, an AM moisturizer with SPF 20, and a PM moisturizer. And in addition to amazing skin, members of Tiege Hanley also get tons of benefits. including at least 20% off the retail price, access to exclusive monthly deals, the ability to pause or cancel at any time, and free US shipping. And because Tiege Hanley is sponsoring today's video, they're offering my viewers a great deal. Just click the first link in the description and you'll get 30% off your first box and a free gift. Don't miss out on this amazing deal. Click the link below and get started today. At the same time, because it allows you to keep your back up nice and straight, you can focus on things like avoiding butt wink and just generally improve your biomechanics to the point where this is like a healing movement. And if you have any problems with your back squat, then performing lots of goblet squats is a great way to address them and to learn how to get into that position in a safe, healthy, and mechanically advantageous manner. Really simply, there was a time I couldn't get into a deep resting squat. There was a time I couldn't perform a pistol squat without falling over backwards, and there was a time that any time I got into a back squat, I had an awful lot more butt wink. That's far, far better now than it was a few years ago, and it was the goblet squat, and it was practicing deep bodyweight squats that solved that issue for me. So maybe you're now thinking, great, this is a useful accessory to the back squat, and that's all. But actually, the goblet squat has a bunch of benefits all its own that make it worth doing whoever you are. It's actually an extremely functional movement. Of course, a goblet squat, by putting the weight in front of you, is going to be similar to a front squat in that it's going to train the quads a little bit more than the glutes. This makes it an interesting variation. It means you can build up to the strength you need to do things like sissy squats. But if you're worried about losing out on the glutes, then of course you can combine it with something like a kettlebell swing, and that gives you the full package. And then there's what it does for your core, because by holding the weight in front of you, it completely changes the activation of your core. In other words, the weight is in front of you, so it's trying to bend you forwards, and you have to engage those posterior chain muscles to bring yourself back up nice and straight. So again, this is training you to keep your body straight. And the reason this is so extremely beneficial is that pretty much any time you pick something up in the real world, this is how you're going to pick it up. If I pick up my kids, they're in front of me. If I pick up a heavy box, it's in front of me. If I pick up a piece of furniture, it's in front of me. A dog, whatever else, I'm going to pick it up in front of me like that. And so training my spine to handle that is actually really useful and is going to translate to real-world strength. What you don't tend to do in the real world is put weight on your shoulders, on your back. This isn't a particularly functional exercise in that sense. It has tons of functional carryover, don't get me wrong, but in terms of whether or not you actually use this movement out and about, the goblet squat is a much closer approximation of how you move in the real world. So this is the crux of my argument a little bit. If you're someone who's worried that you need a gym in order to train to get strong because you can't perform back squat at home, well, I'm here to tell you, you don't really need to perform back squat because you're never going to lift that much weight onto your back because you can't get that much weight onto your back. Maybe a person in like a really rare scenario. If you're going to pick something up, it's going to be in this position. And the amount of weight you need to be able to pick up in this position is the equivalent of whatever you can find to train with. At the same time, there are other practical benefits to the front squat. Some people really struggle with the back squat. The biomechanics are awkward, and depending on things like lip length, the biomechanics are a little awkward. They're hard to teach for someone who's starting out new. And depending on things like limb lengths and torso length and the depth of your hip sockets, you might actually find that this is a movement you never feel really comfortable with. So rather than beating yourself up and struggling with it and maybe getting an injury, instead move on to the goblet squat, which is a much more natural position, something that more people can do with less trouble. But I know what some of you are going to be thinking. You're so predictable. You're going to be thinking, I still can't be training with 20 kilograms. That's just not enough if I'm used to back squatting hundreds of kilograms. Well, there are some things we can do about that, and I'll show you how you can load it up a bit heavier in a moment. But at the same time, I just think it can be useful to get out of that mindset a little bit. Like I say, unless you're a powerlifter, in which case, of course, you need to practice those lifts. Most people don't need that much max strength. You're not going to get into that position and perform a 1 rep maximum with a huge amount of weight on your back. If you can squat 100 kilograms, then you're probably golden for pretty much anything you're going to want to do in the real world. And what's more useful than being able to squat a really heavy weight once is being able to move a lighter weight, but more times, so you've got that strength endurance as well. If you do need to pick something up, it's rare that you only pick it up once. You're normally going to pick it up, then walk with it, or you're going to pick up that and then get something else, if you're loading pallets onto a truck or something. In the real world, strength endurance is just as important as max strength. What I really like about the back squat, in particular, especially with heavy weights, is that it trains you to be more explosive, to run faster and to jump higher. And this has been demonstrated in studies as something that definitely happens, and it's one of the best ways to do that, which is great. But it is only one way to do that, and there are other ways we can make up for that. For example, goblet squat jumps. Do exactly the movement we're doing here, but throw a jump in at the end. It becomes a far more explosive movement. You then want longer rest times. You can do this for a few reps and really focus on exploding out the movement as much as you can. And again, this is shown in studies to improve jump height and running speed. So if that's what you're concerned about, then you can get that way. And when you do something like this, you actually don't want too much weight. you want about 30% of your body weight. More than that, and it slows the movement down, so it's no longer explosive. You can't produce as much explosive force. So goblet squat jumps with a slightly lighter weight, something that you can fit into your home, for example, are actually perfect for this kind of training. And if you've heard some people saying that you don't need to train for explosiveness specifically because you can't convert fast twitch muscle fiber, don't listen to that. For starters, you can convert fast twitch muscle fiber. It's about 50% genetically determined, 50% training. Not only that, but we're not only converting fast twitch muscle fiber, we're also training intra and intermuscular coordination. We're training the neural drive. This contributes to our explosiveness, as well as the myotatic stretch response. So this kind of training is perfect if explosiveness is what you want. Explosiveness, core stability, strength, and mobility. Sounds like a recipe for an amazing athlete. But likewise, there are other variations you can use if you want to mix up the goblet squat. A great one is the goblet squat walk. Get into the lower position and waddle along the ground. This is amazing for building strong knees and improving mobility, but it's also pretty intense, so build up to it slowly and don't move through pain. You can also walk with the weight in a goblet position, squat, and then continue walking, thereby combining a goblet squat with a loaded carry. Or mix up all three. Waddle, squat, walk. Squat, waddle, squat, walk, squat. I call this the Goblet squat. Any locomotive movement like this, where you're moving with the weight, tends to be really good. After all, that's how we tend to lift weight in the real world. We pick it up in order to move it. Finally, there are ways that you can load up the goblet squat with a bit more weight. Obviously, you can get kettlebells that are heavier than 20 kilograms. I've got one that's 36 kilograms. If you're wondering why it's so massive, that's because it's made of vinyl and it was cheap. It's really unwieldy and was a bad investment. You can also get iron kettlebells that go much heavier. And of course, if you're using dumbbells and you go to your gym, you can find dumbbells that weigh 50 kilograms. That's still not a super impressive squat, but we're starting to get to something where if you're using higher rep ranges, you're gonna feel it, at least a little bit, unless you're like made of iron. And of course, you can put your kettlebells or your dumbbells into the racked position, hold one on each arm, and then that way you can squat like 100 kilograms or even more. Now obviously this is going to be harder than back squatting that much weight because you're going to be training the core much more and the arms. This is also a little bit of an arm workout, which means you're going to fail probably sooner. Once you get used to it, now you've built some really super functional strength that you can take out into the real world and actually pick up really heavy stuff. So if you're saying you don't want to lift like this because you're not lifting as much as you would do in the back squat, it doesn't really make sense because this is the actual strength you would be able to use outside of the gym. So yeah, if you can go up to 100 kilograms, goblet squat, and perform like 10 repetitions, you're pretty darn strong. Obviously you can do front squats if you want similar benefits, targeting the quads more, etc. But this involves some like arm contortion and it's a much more technical lift. If you want to train the core even more, you can load the weight onto one side, now training a bit of anti-lateral flexion. Or you can have uneven weights, one in each arm, which is something I do because that's the weight I have access to. I mean, this is something I literally do all the time. I lift my daughter in front of me like a goblet squat, and then she wants me to pick something up off the ground, so I put her in one arm, she weighs nearly 20 kilograms, I squat down, I pick it up in the other arm and stand back up. Sometimes I'm squatting with her in one arm and my son in the other, which is just a slightly lighter version of exactly what I was just doing over there with those two kettlebells. So yeah, in terms of specificity and transferring to real world activities, it's hard to beat the goblet squat. So anyways guys, I hope you found this useful and interesting. If you did, please leave a like and share it around. That helps me out immensely. Let me know in the comments down below whether you train using a goblet squat or whether you use other squat variations and what those are. If you want a training program built around ideas like this, then check out my ebook and training program, Super Functional Training 2.0. A link will be in the description down below. If you want more content from The Bioneer, then sign up as a patron. You get access to exclusive videos, early videos, ad-free videos, free training plans, apps, and all sorts of other stuff. I'm just about to upload my Functional 4 routine, which takes the Functional 3 that people seem to respond really well to, and I include the goblet squat as one of the exercises. Spoiler. So yeah, check that out if you fancy it. But either way, guys, thank you so much for watching as always, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.